Every spring, millions of gardeners do the exact same thing. They buy the seeds, they prep the soil, they plant with so much hope, and by July, half of it is dead, stunted, or eaten alive. Most people blame bad luck, bad weather, bad soil, a black thumb. But here's what nobody tells you. It's almost never luck. In nearly every failed garden I've consulted on, the damage traces back to one of 7 specific mistakes. And most of them happen in the first 2 weeks of the season, long before you ever see a problem. Mistake number 4 is the one that quietly kills more tomato plants than any pest or disease combined, and almost nobody knows they're doing it. For generations, experienced growers, the ones whose gardens somehow look effortless, have followed a set of unspoken rules. Not because they read it in a book, but because they learned it the hard way, season after season, often from someone who learned it the hard way before them. These aren't tricks, they're corrections. Small adjustments that take a struggling garden and turn it into one that actually feeds you. Most modern gardening content focuses on what to add. More fertilizer, more amendments, more products. But the real transformation almost always comes from what you stop doing. Before we get into the list, here's what's coming. One of these mistakes is something you were probably taught to do on purpose, and it's working against you every single day. Another one explains why your plants look fine for weeks and then collapse all at once, seemingly overnight. And the last mistake on this list, the one almost every gardener makes without exception, is the reason so many people give up entirely after just 1 or 2 seasons. Stay with me. This is going to change how you look at your garden. Number 7. Planting too early because the weather feels warm enough. Most gardeners watch the thermometer. Experienced growers watch the soil. This distinction has been understood by farmers for centuries. Long before weather forecasts existed, growers across Europe and North America relied on soil temperature, not air temperature, to time their planting, because they learned that a warm afternoon in April can be followed by a soil temperature that's still freezing at root level. Here's the myth. Most people assume that if it's warm enough to go outside without a jacket, it's warm enough to plant. It isn't. Warm season crops like tomatoes, peppers, beans, and squash need soil temperatures consistently above 60 Fahrenheit to germinate and grow without stress. Plant into cold soil, and seeds either rot before they sprout or seedlings sit there, stunted, for weeks, vulnerable to fungal disease the entire time. The mechanism is straightforward. Cold soil slows root development dramatically. A plant with weak roots is a plant that can't take up nutrients efficiently no matter how good your soil is. It's not dead, but it's behind, and in gardening, behind often means it never catches up. The practical fix is simple. Use a soil thermometer, not a calendar, and not your jacket. Push it 4 inches into the soil. For most warm-season vegetables, wait until it reads 60 Fahrenheit consistently for several days. For cold-hardy crops like peas, spinach, and lettuce, you have far more flexibility, which is exactly why so many gardeners get away with early planting on those crops and assume the same rule applies to everything else. It doesn't. Sometimes the most damaging mistakes aren't the ones you make. They are the ones you make too soon. Number 6. Watering on a schedule instead of watering based on need. This is one of the most common habits in American backyard gardening, and it comes from good intentions. Set a timer, water every morning, stay consistent. It sounds responsible, but consistency on a schedule and consistency for the plant are 2 very different things. Here's the myth. Most gardeners believe that more frequent watering means a healthier garden. In reality, overwatering is one of the leading causes of root rot, fungal disease, and weak, shallow root systems in home vegetable gardens. When soil is constantly moist, roots have no reason to grow deep in search of water. They stay shallow, near the surface, exactly where they're most vulnerable to heat and drought stress later in the season. The mechanism here involves oxygen, not just water. Plant roots need air pockets in the soil to breathe. Constant watering fills those pockets with water, suffocating roots and creating the exact damp, low oxygen conditions that fungal pathogens like Pythium and Phytophthora thrive in. These are 2 of the most common culprits behind sudden plant collapse, where a tomato plant looks healthy one day and is wilted and dying the next. The practical fix is to check the soil before you water, not the clock. Stick your finger 2 inches into the soil near the root zone. If it's still moist, wait. Most established vegetable plants do better with deep, infrequent watering, roughly 1 to 2 inches of water per week, delivered in fewer sessions rather than light daily sprinkling that only wets the surface. A garden that's watered on command grows shallow roots. A garden that's watered on need grows deep ones. And deep roots are what get a plant through a heat wave without you even noticing there was one. Number 5. Planting everything too close together. This mistake feels productive while you're doing it. A tightly packed garden bed looks abundant, efficient like you're maximizing every inch of space. For weeks, it even works. Then the plants get bigger and everything changes. Here's the myth. Most new gardeners assume that spacing recommendations on seed packets are conservative, suggestions for people with extra space to spare. In reality, those spacing numbers account for the plant's full mature size, including root spread underground, which is often invisible and easy to forget about. The mechanism is competition for light, water, and nutrients, but also for airflow. Overcrowded plants shade each other out, reducing photosynthesis. Their root systems compete for the same limited water and nutrients in the soil. And critically, dense foliage with poor airflow creates a humid microclimate that's ideal for fungal diseases like powdery mildew and blight, two of the most common reasons home gardeners lose entire crops of squash, cucumbers, and tomatoes in late summer. The practical fix is to respect the mature spacing, not the seedling spacing. If a tomato plant will eventually be 3 feet wide, plant it 3 feet from its neighbor, even though on day one it looks like a tiny, lonely sprig in a huge, empty space. That empty space is not wasted. It's the room the plant needs to become what it's capable of becoming. Growth needs room before it needs anything else. Crowd it now, and you're not saving space. You're borrowing against next month's harvest. Number 4. The one I mentioned at the start, and it's one of the most common causes of preventable tomato disease in backyard gardens across the U.S. Watering the leaves instead of the soil, especially in the evening. This habit is almost universal, and it feels intuitive. The plant looks thirsty, the leaves look dry and a little wilted in the afternoon heat, so we reach for the hose and spray the whole plant down. It feels like relief. For the plant, it's often the opposite. Here's the myth. Most gardeners believe that wetting the foliage cools the plant and helps it absorb moisture. Vegetable plants absorb almost all of their water through their roots, not their leaves. Water sitting on leaves overnight does something else entirely. It creates the exact damp, dark conditions that fungal spores need to germinate and spread. The mechanism is well documented in plant pathology. Diseases like early blight, late blight, and powdery mildew, some of the most common tomato and squash diseases in home gardens across the U.S., spread primarily through water splashing spores from the soil onto lower leaves, and then spreading further when leaves stay wet for extended periods. Evening watering is particularly damaging because the leaves stay damp all night, with no sun or breeze to dry them out, giving fungal spores 8 or more hours of ideal germination conditions. The practical fix has 2 parts. Water at the base of the plant, directly onto the soil using a soaker hose, drip line, or simply aiming the watering can at the root zone. And water in the early morning, so any incidental moisture on the leaves dries quickly as the day warms up. This single change, moving the water from the leaves to the soil, and from evening to morning, removes one of the easiest conditions for disease to take hold, and that alone makes a noticeable difference by late summer. Number 3. Feeding plants with high nitrogen fertilizers all season long. This mistake comes from a reasonable place. Nitrogen makes plants green, lush, and fast-growing, and when you see that vibrant green growth after fertilizing, it feels like proof that you're doing something right. Here's the myth. Most gardeners assume that if a little nitrogen helps a plant grow, more nitrogen applied consistently will help it grow even better and produce more food. For leafy greens like lettuce and spinach, that's largely true. For fruiting plants like tomatoes, peppers, and squash, it's often the opposite. The mechanism is a resource allocation trade-off. Excess nitrogen pushes plants to prioritize leaf and stem growth over flower and fruit production. A tomato plant on a high nitrogen diet can become a towering, dark green jungle of foliage that produces remarkably few tomatoes, because the plant's internal signals are telling it to keep growing leaves, not to invest energy into flowering and fruiting. The practical fix is to shift the fertilizer balance as the season progresses. Early on, when plants are establishing roots and leaves, nitrogen is genuinely useful. But once a plant starts flowering, switching to a fertilizer with relatively higher phosphorus and potassium, often labeled with a lower first number on the N-peak ratio, supports flower and fruit development instead of endless vegetative growth. A garden that's all leaves and no fruit isn't unhealthy. It's just being fed the wrong message at the wrong time. Number 2, ignoring soil pH, or never testing it at all. Here's something that trips up even careful gardeners. You can have perfect soil, perfect compost, and the right fertilizer, and still get a disappointing harvest. Not because anything you added was wrong, but because of something invisible happening at the chemical level, something no amount of additional fertilizer can fix. Here's the myth. Most home gardeners assume that if they're adding compost, fertilizer, and good soil, the nutrients are automatically available to the plant. Soil pH determines how available those nutrients actually are to plant roots, regardless of how much is technically present in the soil. The mechanism is chemical, not biological. Most vegetables thrive in soil with a pH between 6.0 and 7.0, slightly acidic to neutral. Outside that range, even in soil packed with nutrients, certain elements become chemically locked up, unavailable for roots to absorb. In soil that's too acidic or too alkaline, a plant can be sitting in technically fertile soil and still show signs of nutrient deficiency, because the nutrients are there, but the plant simply can't reach them. The practical fix is a simple, inexpensive soil pH test. Available at most garden centers and hardware stores across the U.S., or through your local agricultural extension office, many of which offer soil testing services for a small fee. If your pH is off, the fixes are gradual and well-established. Garden lime to raise pH in acidic soil, or sulfur and organic matter to lower it in alkaline soil. You can do everything else right and still struggle if the one thing determining whether any of it matters goes unchecked. Number 1. And here it is. The mistake almost every single gardener makes, the one I promised at the start. That's the reason so many people quietly give up after 1 or 2 seasons. Number 1, giving up on a plant or an entire bed too early in the season. This one isn't a technique mistake. It's a mindset mistake, and it might be the most costly one on this entire list. Here's the myth. Most gardeners assume that if a plant looks bad in June, July, or even August, struggling, yellowing, barely producing, it's a failure, and the season is essentially over for that crop. The truth is that many vegetable plants go through a visible slump that has nothing to do with whether they'll ultimately produce. The mechanism is about plant life cycles, not plant health. Peppers are a textbook example. Pepper plants often sit there for weeks in early to mid-summer, small, slow, barely changing, while they build out their root systems. Many home gardeners assume the plant is failing and either pull it or stop caring for it right before the plant shifts into rapid flowering and fruit production once it's hot and the roots are established, often producing most of its harvest in late summer. Tomatoes show a different version of the same pattern. A tomato plant that's been hit by early blight can look genuinely alarming by midsummer, yellowing lower leaves, brown spots, leaves dropping off the bottom of the plant. It looks like a plant on its way out. But if the upper growth is still green and the plant is still flowering, removing the affected lower leaves and continuing to water at the base, the morning watering fix from mistake number 4. The plant very often pushes through and goes on to produce a full harvest in September, well after the gardener who gave up in July has already cleared the bed. And cool season crops add a third layer to this. Lettuce, spinach, and broccoli that bolt, wilt, or stall out in the July and August heat often aren't done. As temperatures drop in September and October, many of these plants put out a second wave of growth, sometimes a better harvest than they gave in spring, in a bed that looked completely finished 2 months earlier. The practical fix is patience paired with observation, not patience alone. Before pulling a struggling plant, check 2 things. Is there new growth at the growing tips, even small amounts? And is the plant still flowering or setting fruit anywhere on it? If either answer is yes, it's still in the game, and the right move is often to remove the damaged or dead parts, adjust the one thing that's actually wrong, like watering habits, and give it the rest of the season to recover. The gardeners who get the best harvests aren't always the ones with the best soil or the most expensive setup. Often, they're simply the ones who didn't clear the bed in the 1 month it looked like it was failing. So here's my question for you. Out of these 7, which one have you been doing without realizing it? Was it the evening watering, the overcrowded beds, or did you give up on something in July that might have come back if you'd just waited a little longer? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and honestly, some of the best fixes I've ever shared on this channel came from things gardeners told me in the comments first. And if this is helping you see your garden differently, this is exactly what Easy Harvest Gardens is here for. We're not about expensive setups or perfect conditions. We're about figuring out, together, what's actually going wrong, and fixing it with what you've already got. So if that sounds like your kind of gardening, hit subscribe, because every week, we're breaking down another piece of the puzzle. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. None of these 7 mistakes are about being a bad gardener. Every single one of them comes from doing something that feels right, watering more, fertilizing more, planting close together to use the space well, stepping in to fix a plant by watering its leaves, giving up on something that genuinely looks like it's failing. These aren't lazy mistakes. They're caring mistakes. And that's exactly why they're so common and so easy to miss. Gardening isn't about getting everything perfect from day one. It's about slowly learning which of your instincts are helping your garden and which ones, despite good intentions, are working against it. Every gardener who grows a great harvest isn't someone who never made these mistakes. They're someone who made them, noticed, and adjusted. Your garden isn't broken. It's giving you information every single day if you know what to look for. And now, you know a little more than you did 10 minutes ago. If this video helped you spot something in your own garden, do me a favor. Drop a comment and let me know which mistake you're going to fix first. I read every single one, and I love seeing what's growing and what's changing in gardens all across the country. And if you want more of this, real fixes, real reasons, no fluff, hit subscribe, because at Easy Harvest Gardens, we're just getting started.